Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die Radio. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Today on the show, I'm pleased to introduce you to my new friend, Leo Bonomo. Leo is a professional, inspirational, clairvoyant medium and psychic. He's the author of 2 books, Summerland and A Book of Thoughts. Leo is also the UK manager of the organization ASSMPI, which stands for the American Society for Standards in Mediumship and Psychical Investigation. Leo is my new friend, and I was delighted to spend a wonderful lunch with him last week when I went to Stansted in the UK. So without further ado, here's my new friend, Leo Bonomo. Welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That's a wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
Well, it's interesting how we met because it was one of those great synchronicities. I found myself on Google looking up some things about physical mediumship and trance mediumship, and I don't know how, but one of the blog posts that you had written showed up, and I just thought, well, who's this guy? You know, he seems pretty interesting. Next thing you know, I sent you a message on Facebook. Next thing you know, we're talking on Skype. And then there we are having lunch together last week.
Yeah, and it was just brilliant meeting you. It's wonderful to meet you. And yeah, it's nice when you get these coincidences, isn't it? I mean, I don't believe in coincidences,
No.
as you know, but it's nice when these things just fall into the place completely out of the blue. And to me, it just shows that, you know, every waking minute, well, even sleeping, spirit is there guiding you very gently and just pointing the direction.
Yeah, and I needed a fun new friend. So besides just having a really inspirational lunch, it's just nice to connect because you're just a really warm, loving person and you're funny.
Oh,
I love that.
I try to be.
Oh, there's always room for laughter in my life.
Absolutely.
And that was really nice. So let's talk about you. Let's get on to what the show's about. And it's titled We Don't Die. And maybe, Leo, you can tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you grew up and got into this fantastic field of work.
Well, there's a certain percentage of mediums that kind of retain this knowledge from when they were born or when they were young. And my very first experience, and I don't like the word ghost, actually. It's kind of got that spooky kind of, you know, horror film feeling generally. Yes. But I saw my first ghost when I was 2, and we lived in Forest Gate in London, and we had some friends that lived in Manor Park, and we were walking back. It was a nice warm evening, about 7:30, and we was walking past Manor Park Cemetery, and the cemetery itself must have extended slightly beyond the present gates because we're walking along, and I'm between my parents, and I just got this feeling that there was someone behind us. So I turned round and I saw a gentleman horizontally rise through the pavement and stand up vertically. And I didn't think that was strange. Didn't faze me at all. But what was strange was that he was wearing Victorian clothes, so top hat, tails, that kind of thing. And so I'm staring at this guy that's behind us, and my dad says, what's wrong, you know? And I said, oh, there's a funny man behind us. So we turned round, all 3 of us, couldn't see anything, turned back. I still had this feeling, so I turned round and there he was again, and then we all turned round again. This happened a few times. But apart from the fact that I couldn't see him when my parents were looking, so I didn't take any notice of that. I just thought it was one of these things that we all experience, a bit like breathing. We tend not to talk about it, and that we just didn't talk about. So I didn't find it strange at all, and that was my first reintroduction to spirit, and that stayed with me. And I consequently had a very, very interesting childhood. All the things that you can experience, and I know that you've experienced some physical mediumship, and in case some of the listeners don't know what physical mediumship is, it's when spirit physically appear. Now, sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't, but you can have intelligent conversations with them. And as I think you found out when you went to Banyan Center, you can, that if they allow you to touch them, because you can't reach out to them, and you can shake hands. They're very warm, very solid, and it's not scary or spooky. No. It's a wonderful, wonderful evidential thing to go through.
Yes.
So I had things appearing in my room. I had people materializing, voices. I could astral project at will. There was overshadowing.
What does that mean? Overshadowing.
Overshadowing is when a spirit comes very close, and it's a little bit like trance. They blend with your aura, and they take over. Usually it's in a very nice way. It can happen different ways. And so I was overshadowed by this old gentleman that actually lived in my dad's bedroom. And in my own bedroom, he used to come and overshadow. And it's a very interesting story, actually, because this went on for a while. And my guides allowed it to happen under a protective cloak, if you like. So they would wait and see how I would react. And after a while, this went over quite a few months, I think, I realised that there was something that wasn't quite right. And so I wanted to find out, and I was wondering what the best thing was. And cats, especially, but cats, dogs, animals are very, very sensitive to spirit. So I thought, right, okay, well, next time he comes, I'll find the cat. And he took over. Yeah, he took over one day, and then I realised the cat, as if by magic, was on the landing outside the bedroom. So I opened the bedroom door and I stepped forward. Well, the cat took one look at me, the back arched, and it literally ran up the wallpaper and across the ceiling. It was terrified. So I thought, okay, not good. Shut the door and thought, how am I going to deal with this? And then my guides showed me how to deal with it and that. So my experiences were very, 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 very varied. Another one that was beautiful. I was lying there trying to get to sleep one night, and a tiny, tiny hand, about 6 inches from the floor, just pushed my bedroom door open. It was disembodied, but again, not frightening, and it just pushed my bedroom door open. And that's a memory that stayed with me all my life.
And so you could see the hand.
I could see a little white hand. It was, in a sense, ghost-like. It was white. It was obviously solid. It could push the door open. It wasn't transparent, but it was cut off at the wrist, and it just pushed my door open. And to me, it was a beautiful experience. So,
Leo,
growing up,
can I just back up to the overshadowing? I don't want to step over this because it actually sounds kind of scary. From your experience, did somebody take you over? I mean, it's just I don't want to be left with like this fear that somebody could just step in at any point into my life, and I have a cat. And
I wouldn't worry about you. I know you're very well protected.
Okay.
This was allowed to happen by my guide, so I would have a very gentle introduction in a very, very safe environment of what can happen. But yes, what they do is they overshadow you, so they can begin to influence you, and you can give trance messages in that state. They can speak through you. Sometimes the voice will change. But this was an entity that wasn't overly friendly. But it was necessary for me to learn how entities can take over, what it feels like, the experience of it, how they fool you. So it was done in a very instructional way. And I was blessed to have that protection, but again, a wide range of experiences. So yes, it started to take over, and the more confident it got, the more it imposed its own personality, and the more I got strange feelings of I feel like I want to do this or I want to do that. I suppose the way that I could explain it more is schizophrenics hear voices,
Yes.
so do mediums. So we're very, very close on that score. But of course, we hear good voices, they don't. So there was starting to impinge things which were slightly odd, and it graduated into things that were starting to not be very nice at all. And so I gradually learned the process of how they come in very friendly sometimes and then start to take over. So it was invaluable. It's not... Sorry, go on.
No, just before we end this part of the conversation, talk a little bit about protection, because I get the feeling, I mean, I just spent a week at the Arthur Findlay College taking a course in trance mediumship, and I actually felt the presence of people kind of blend energies with me, and we did speak philosophy and great things. That'll be my next show. But anyways, I don't want to leave people with that anytime someone could just step in and take them over, if there's a way to gently have a prayer of protection or anything like that. You know what I'm getting at? You're trained in this, but if someone's never heard this show before, they might think somebody could just step into me. What? And how I don't.
We don't want to leave them dangling, do we?
No. Or myself.
So what my guides taught me on that particular occasion, and I was only about 7 or 8, and what they taught me on that occasion was that the need to recognise and to be aware enough to recognise, and then what to do about it. And one of the things that you do is you do need to close down. And I always see the chakras or chakras as colours. So it's red for the base, orange for the spleen, lemon yellow for the stomach, green, grass green for the heart, blue for the throat chakra. I always see indigo on the forehead. Now, most people see that as the crown chakra. And I see the crown chakra as brilliant white. And this is how I teach my students. So what we do is we close down in reverse order. So I would see that light. Now, the crown chakra, some people are not aware, is about 6 or 7 inches above the head. So I see that light dim and go out, and then that energy drop down to the forehead, and that go out and down to the throat, etc. So I see all those go out. Now, from a very early age, my guides taught me to place myself inside an eggshell. Now, if you think about a chick, it's totally protected. It's permeable, so it's not the kind of thing where people think, oh my God, I'm going to suffocate. So you can breathe. It's all round. Now, the reason they use this is because lots of people use a cloak of protection. And for me, it's never made sense. A cloak, by definition, is open at the face. Sometimes there's no hood. It's open at the bottom. So we place ourselves inside an eggshell, fill it with brilliant white light. Now, quite often it will change. So if you're a bit depleted and you need energy, you may see browns and reds or orange or whatever you need, or very soothing colours. And so we do that. But the other thing that they taught me as well was to see in my mind's eye as brilliant a white light as I can. And I painted the walls with it, the floor and the ceiling as well. And where the floors and ceilings join, it's like mastic, brilliant white light just around the down the corners and the floor, where it all joins. And what that does is that creates a protective box, and your guide is also outside of that box, but very aware of anything that's going on, so nothing can penetrate. Now, I don't tend to clear houses, but I clean or clear houses with that method as well, and would do that in every single room. So each room or the stairs itself may be several compartments, a flight and then the landing, whatever. And large cupboards I would treat as a box itself, and I clear houses with that. Now, if you are slightly concerned, you can do that once or twice. I wouldn't do it too often, because what they taught me as well is I started to do it every week, and this went on for 2 or 3 months, and it closed me down for a time. So it's very, very powerful. But you've got total control in that way. I did a house clearing one time where there was a lot of physicality. So cupboards were opening, doors were slamming. And the young lady and her boyfriend that called me to the home, they had a huge iron bed. And it would take 3 or 4 people to lift it. And it was floating around the floor like on ice.
Oh my.
And we did the cleansing. Everything stopped. And I told them to carry on for, I think it was every week for a month or so, and then just give it a rest. And if it's still subsided, fine. But just to let them know that they also had control over it. So it's a very powerful way of protecting yourself.
Interesting. I haven't really practiced too much protection, but I think I maybe have, just envisioning myself in a bubble of energy and only good in this. So I think maybe I just had the intention and I was actually doing that,
Yeah. Well, intention is everything in spirit. So if you intend that kind of contact, then, safe contact, then that's what you'll get. If you tend to dabble a little bit, then that can open you up. I had a guy call me, and he was an atheist. I think it's the best way to describe him. And he was completely drunk one night and decided that he was going to challenge the very devil to appear. Got a Ouija board out, which is not a good thing to play with. And basically, he was doing this in his garage, and the temperature dropped. Things started moving around, and the guy was absolutely frightened. And he rang me after a couple of months because this was all day, every day, and he could not shift it. So I tried to help him, but because he kept looking for it to make sure that it had gone, I call it the monster under the bed syndrome, where you there's nothing there, but you've got to look. And what happens in these circumstances, as you look, you reach out a hand or you make contact, and of course it invites them back. So he kept doing that, so there wasn't a lot that I could do with him. So it depends on the circumstances. It does depend on your personality, but generally there's no problem.
No, and I know too, what we focus on grows. So I mean, if I'm going on a trip to Hawaii, I start seeing Hawaiian shirts everywhere, or if I'm buying a new car and I've picked out that specific one, I see them everywhere. And same thing, once, I think, in the good way, when we start working with the spirit world and with our guides, and we really start communicating and being in communication and talking, all of a sudden we start noticing great things that are happening. So focus on the good. Don't be like the guy focusing on the bad. I
think he just got a real big surprise, because I think he didn't think it existed, and that's why he'd gone really over the top. But
yeah. Anyway, so let's get on more to how you became a medium and decided to give your life to working with people.
Well, I was very sensitive all the time, so a lot of this stuff was everyday stuff, literally, for me. And when in the early 80s, Spirit kept pushing me, you need to do this work, and I kept saying, well, I need proof. I'm not just going to take your word for it. And proof is a definite for mediumship. You have to have that there. And so we kind of battled that way a little bit. For a while, and then I said, it's no good waking me up. It's no good telling me. I need proof. So they came back and they told me about the Spiritual Association of Great Britain, the SAGB, which has been going over 100 years now, and it was originally in Belgrave Square. So I thought, okay, and I looked it up and thought, well, that sounds good. But the fact that you've just told me about that, I don't regard that as proof. I want something else. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was a very, very good medium who now lives in the States, Robert Brown, he came to me in a dream, and he said that you need to you need to go and see Jerry March at the Spiritual Association of Great Britain. Well, I'd never heard of her. So I got in contact with the SAGB. There was a Jerry March there.
Pretty cool, yeah.
Pretty cool. So I thought, well, that's proof. That's great. And so I went along. Now, the interesting thing was that Jerry didn't feel I was right for her class at that time. So I looked around, funnily enough. Robert Brown was also a tutor there.
Wow.
And he was meant to be there. They used to do them in 10-week blocks. So he was there for about 4 weeks, disappeared. We eventually found out he went to Germany. So I was taught initially by Robert Brown, and then that kind of collapsed. And then I went back and saw Jerry March and said, look, I told her about the dream, and she welcomed me into the class. And so I was there for about 8 years. And that's really where my training came in, because I think it's wonderful to have experience. But it's like when you're doing a demonstration, you need to be able to public speak. You need common sense. You may have a gift, but you need a way of getting it over effectively. So that's where my formal training really came in. And so I trained for 8 years, started doing the churches and that kind of thing. And it was literally in 2005 when in 2002, 2003, end of 2002, beginning 2003, I used to be a jeweler, goldsmith, and I lost my company because I was victim of a hit and run, and I had a couple of years leading up to 2005 where things were just not working out. I was losing every job that I was getting. Wow. And you need to pay bills. And so Spirit came to me more or less in a kind of a very friendly but I told you so kind of way. And now what you're going to do? And I thought, well, the only thing I can do now is mediumship. So in 2005, that's when I became a professional medium.
Do you remember some of the first times that you really impacted someone's life, giving them an accurate medium reading? I know a lot of people come. You might not remember.
Yeah. I remember things if it's a lesson for me, and I learn something every single day.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very humbling, because you think you understand something and you see it in a different light and you go, oh my God. I've lost my place.
No, that's all right. What I'm looking for, just because it's one thing to believe in mediumship, but maybe just a couple of stories, even something recent that maybe you had somebody grieving that was with you, and just some of the accurate information you were able to bring through.
Yeah. Well, the information I tend to remember if it's a lesson for me or my students, so those can be quite sketchy. But I did a reading for a lady some time ago, and she was actually a skeptic, never had a reading before, and it was arranged by her daughter. And on the review that came through, she said, the daughter said that her mum was a skeptic, didn't really believe in this, and that her husband had come through. He'd used specific phrases that she recognised in the way that she would recognise, and gave her valuable information. So the details of it I don't remember.
No, that's fine.
But so it's when you get this kind of information, it's life changing.
Yes.
Because there's no denying that there is something there, and you've had similar proof yourself. With the voices on the tape. So it is life changing. So that's happened. I had there's a company that I work with, and I tend to get predictions as well. Now, usually that's connected with tarot, that kind of thing. But I'm kind of known for the predictions. And one of the customer service officers that works for the company, she rang me and said, I need a little reading. And again, I only remembered when she'd got back to me, but I told her that she would be moving in 6 months' time, and her immediate reaction was, can't happen, can't afford it, don't want to move, never going to happen.
Okay.
And then she rang me up about 2 months later, and she went, you know what you said? I went, no. She said, well, I'm moving. And she just explained what had happened during that very short reading. it's wonderful. Some of the messages are like epiphanies, and you literally have people crying because of the information that's given, and it can be anything really.
Sure, and it doesn't take much to really validate. And I personally have been to some mediums, Leo, that whether they weren't good or they weren't tuned into the same channel as me, but they've just given so much vague information that it's like, well, it was nice, but it wasn't the thing I needed. I mean, we really need sometimes those specifics to know for sure that no one else could know this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm known for campaigning against bad mediumship and that kind of thing. One of the things that I have several pet hates, and one of the pet hates, I also write for Psychic World, which is a worldwide newspaper, and I did an article once on the throwing it out there method, as the way that I call it, and Spirit gave it to me. And that's when you go to a demonstration and you get a medium stand up, and they'll look at the audience, and they may be older and say, right, I've got a grandfather here, and if you're 80, your grandfather's
chances are,
chances are, who'd have thought that? And so that kind of thing I really dislike. But also when they go, I've got somebody here, his first name's John, his second name's Smith,
right,
and I'm over here in the audience somewhere. There is no need for that. Because if your Aunt Jane contacts me, she knows who you are. So it doesn't matter whether there's 10 in the audience or 200. She knows her own granddaughter. And this is something that I instill in all my students. Ask. There is no need to ask questions. I don't like mediums that ask questions. Like, why am I seeing a green door? It's like, just ask the communicator why they're showing you. So I've got several pet hates with it, and asking questions and not knowing where you are. It does happen. 99% of the time I know where I am. Sometimes there is confusion, but there's usually a good reason for that. Sometimes couples will come into a church and they'll separate. And so there are times when I'm not sure who I'm with between the two of them, but it's because they're married. So there's generally good reasons for it. And again, if your grandfather comes, he knows who you're married to, and he goes, well, there's her over there and there's him in this corner, because they know, obviously they know. So there should be no reasons to ask a recipient anything. They're there for information.
Right.
And that's how it should be. So yeah, I'm pretty hot on mediums that ask questions and don't know where they are. As I say, with the mediumship reading, it's a normal reading. You're talking to someone who's in spirit, and you've got the recipient there, and it's a normal conversation. Some mediums make so much of it, that they have this contact, and it's something we all have. We all have this ability, and at the risk of doing myself out of a job, which would be wonderful, if we all had that level, we wouldn't need mediums. We'd have that constant confirmation all the time, and it takes away that fear of death. That's religious made. Yeah.
And you've worked with people, and at their very first time being with you, that they're able to do a medium reading or sense a spirit person with them?
Yeah, I'm very, very blessed. I've sometimes had people that were slightly skeptical.
Sure.
And I show them how to open up properly. And one thing I do is I cleanse all the time. Every time we open, we cleanse. And that's very important because it does purify the body.
What does it mean, cleanse?
Cleanse. So when we open all the chakras, what I would then see is the outline of the body, and draw down brilliant white light. So it's a bit like topping up a milk bowl, filling the feet, up to the knees, hips, etc. And what that white light does, you can use it to manifest. You can use it to heal. So if there are any parts of your body that aren't well, you can kind of concentrate on that area, maybe the liver, and healing will be drawn to that area. And what it does is it cleanses, if you've had a hard day, stressful day, bad thoughts, old memories you can't get rid of. And this is over practice. This isn't done in one single sitting. But it cleanses all the bodies we have. So it cleanses the physical, the mental, the astral, the spiritual. It cleanses all of them. And it will also cleanse back to when we incarnated. And once you really begin to develop, then you'll get blockages from not only the past, but past lives. And those get purged as well. So it's a very, very powerful healing way to work. I've had officially 1 heart attack, 3 heart attacks, and the last time I went to see had an angiogram, the doctor thought I'd been taking the pills, and I don't like taking pills, so I didn't take them. But he said my arteries were in better condition than 8 years before. It has a healing effect. So it's not only cleansing mentally, physically, spiritually, astrally, it cleanses everything. And the purer we are, the purer our connection.
Ah, good to know. Very good to know. Can we back up a little when you were talking about predictions? You don't know how the universe is run, but I've always heard that there's free will, and we have free will to make choices. How can you predict something that hasn't happened yet? What are you tapping into, and do we still have free will?
It's like a lot of stuff in mediumship. It's a technique. So, for example, if you were to ask me a question, with me this happens automatically now. But what I teach my students is, somebody asks you a question about, or you bring up a situation, maybe a job, and you want to find out where that's going. I used to see a rolling calendar. So it would just flip over and I'd get the month and then the year, sometimes the day, and I'd be taken to that point, and then the information given from spirit of, this is a job that you're going to get. So everything is known in spirit, whether the communicator is told and whether they're allowed to tell you, two completely different things, because they're not allowed to give, or we're not allowed to give, life-changing information. For example, if somebody's not able to decide which way you go, and you say, right, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, this is going to happen, and you're going to live happily ever after. Well, in a sense, you take away their free will, because they think, right, that's what it is, and they'll go along that path. Now, that path may have been an option rather than absolutely going to happen. By the same token, if myself or 100 other mediums say, get to the bottom of the road, turn left. If you want to turn right, that's your free will. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean the eventual outcome will be different. You may just take a shorter route or the more scenic route to learn what you need to learn. So we have a great deal of free will. I strongly believe, I know. Somebody asked me once, do you believe in this? And I said, no. And they looked very puzzled. And I said, I know, because there's a big difference in belief and knowing.
Yes.
And what I know is that we plan our lives when we come here. So there are certain tests that we want to face, and I generally describe them as stepping stones. So those we can't avoid. That's our purpose in being here, and we have to experience them. Where the free will comes in is to take the short route or the scenic route to get to that point. Now, once we've learned that lesson or dealt with that situation, it never ever comes back, because object of it's completed. But what happens with some people, they're in a catch-22 situation. For example, they may be in a whole series of abusive relationships.
Yes.
And the reason for that is they've not learned the lesson. They try and avoid it. They don't want to deal with it. They skip round it. And it's like the universe goes, here we go again. So it comes back usually in a very similar form, but harder. And so this is why sometimes people will go through these things. So, yes, you can say, look, you're in a really bad situation. You need to think about it. You know inside you what's right to do. You need to leave this guy. But they've got the free will choice of going, oh, no. And, of course, they go around again. So whilst everything's known and we are sometimes given that information, free will rules. And if we don't complete all of our tasks in this life, that's an excuse, if you like, to incarnate again and learn the same lessons, or hopefully learn the same lessons. It's interesting, Spirit used the word incarnate, not reincarnate.
Interesting. I'm just thinking where we're going to go next with this conversation. There's so much.
Oh, God, yes.
Well, how about your books? Let's visit the topic of your 2 books.
Yeah, well, Summerland is written as a novel. It's never really been written the same way, and it's about a young boy called Alex, just prior to his passing, how he passes, which can easily be missed. So many people are fearful of passing away.
Yes.
So many of them actually miss that point. It's very, very quick. So it's past the point of him passing. What he finds in Summerland, commonly called heaven as well, how you progress, some of the jobs that we have there, because people think work, but we work for the good of others, of course. There are innumerable things to learn. So if you're into, you may want to incarnate next time as a surgeon, so you can learn a lot of those techniques in spirit to be brought back to a time when you can use them here. So you get people like Mozart at 4, brilliant musician, could play anything he heard.
Yes.
Obviously at 4 you can't learn that, so he's brought that from spirit. We commonly call them geniuses.
Yes.
But brought from spirit, so we can learn anything that we want to. So it takes Alex through various phases. We also get to look at mediumship from the other side of life, from spirit point of view, and various things are tackled within the book. So you do get the slightly darker side of it as well, but you also get to learn one of the reasons for cot death, which is a young spirit. We don't, as a newly created spirit or newly coming to Earth, it's very hard to kind of manipulate the body. So we don't just incarnate, that's it. It's a gradual process as well. So sometimes we just get a feel for this world for a few months or a year, and then we pass back to spirit. So it tackles all those kinds of things. Now, we talked before about physical mediumship, and the way that Summerland was written was by automatic writing. And in case the listeners don't know what that is, that's when spirit physically take over your body. And in my case, they took the hand and the pen and began writing. So it's quite similar to that part in Ghost, the film, where he was trying to get her character, I can't remember her character now.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
To go see his girlfriend, and it was a similar thing. So there's a thing called the witching hour between 1 and 4, but generally it's about 1 and 3 o'clock when we're most open and we tend to wake up and have that kind of contact. So they would wake me up and I'd get a verse or a few words in my head, and gradually learn, because I can be very thick over a few months, if I just get up and write, it will go away. So what I started to do was I started to write, and I'd be aware of the first few words, maybe a line, because I'm just writing what I'm hearing, and then I physically passed out, so I was unconscious, and spirit would keep writing, and sometimes it would be a paragraph, sometimes a few verses or a few paragraphs. Other times there would be sheets of A6 paper written, and then they'd wake me up. I'd come round at the end of it and read back what had been written for the very first time. So the process of writing condensed was about 3 months, but it happened over about 3 years, and the book actually came complete apart from punctuation and apart from accents, because there are various accents. One of them is Scottish in the book, and so I had to kind of alter a few words for that, but the work came complete, and that was actually written in 1987, which is interesting because you Ghost come out after that, I believe, or very close to that date. Lots of books that really started to hit the market in a modern sense started to come out around that time. So the book itself was one of the first books, if you like, of the modern era that come out in that way. And it took a long time for Spirit to for the right point in time to come around. There's predictions in the book. Some of them are that this type of genre will become very, very successful. So I think Ghost come out just after that. Mm-hmm. There are lots of films that have come out. You've got The Vampire Diaries. You've got what's that witchcraft one? I can never remember the name of it. That series, The Three Witches. But you know, all these series which have made millions and millions and millions. They all started to come out, and that was a prediction in the book. There are other predictions in the book, which are waiting to appear. One's kind of in transition, which I can't talk about really at the moment. But so it's an interesting book from lots of different aspects.
Leo, didn't you say when we had lunch that it was a number of months or years or whatever, and the Spirit continued the thought from just the sentences before, like just picked up exactly where they had left off?
Yeah, there was a period, it wouldn't happen every night or even every week. And one point there was about a year between writings, and because Spirit know exactly where they are, even if it finished mid-sentence, the very next word would start at the next word. So wherever it left off, it would start. So again, it's a sign that Spirit are there. I hadn't noticed, and you might think being psychic, well, you should have. I was showing a friend the manuscript one time, and she said, "Do you realise that several people have written this?" And I thought, oh my God, I hadn't realised. But in the original writings, which got lost when I got divorced, there is different writing, and it's on all kinds of scraps of paper. Some of it's nice and neat pages. Some of it's on the back of envelopes. It's literally what I could wake up with, half asleep in the night, and think, what can I write on? That'll do. So unfortunately, I lost all that. But there's several styles of writing, which I had forgotten about till this person mentioned it. And so there are, and she could tell exactly when a new person came in to write, which is interesting.
Very great. And what's your other book, A Book of Thoughts?
A Book of Thoughts, it's poems, and it's thoughts and observations from Spirit. So some of it is very inspirational, and there's a poem in there called Summerland, which is the title of the book, and the poem Summerland's also in there. And when you read it, it takes you through life, passing over, learning in spirit, and then incarnating again. So there are lots of poems there, and to say observations and little nuggets from Spirit, and they're both. You can get them both on Amazon. They're both on Kindle, but Summerland's also a paperback. And because a lot of people now, they like a book, don't they? The young have got because it's you connect with it. It's a physical thing, so they're starting to buy books more rather than go to Kindle versions, which is interesting. There's a kind of little reverse there.
Yeah, it's so funny because I like to have a book, but I'm also traveling, and if I hear of something, and I mean, I'm an impulse shopper. I want it now. So I have books on Kindle as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit about passing into Summerland? I know there's some listeners right now who have just lost a loved one, and maybe just a couple of words of what that experience is like, maybe the death experience of the body and waking up in Summerland. Is there a way to
there are each passing's individual.
Okay.
But you can generalize. So one would be where the passing's very quick. That's not necessarily by accident or accidental means, and that's just where you find yourself just suddenly in another place, and a guide or a relative will come forward and welcome you, and it's not a process that you would be aware of. And one of the ways that I can explain that is if you're walking across the road and a car hits you, your body goes one way, you continue walking. You're not actually aware you've been killed. So the process can easily be missed, and people do fret about what's happening. And another process, which is the more natural process of someone gradually getting old, you tend to loosen more in the body. It's the opposite of when you're born. When you're born, you're still very much connected to spirit, and you visit spirit a lot, and then you gradually become more anchored here, and then you're kind of locked in and in a much more physical sense. When you're passing, it's the opposite way. You start to visit spirit more and more and more, so there's a gradual loosening, and then you physically just slip out of the body. We mostly eject from the head. So when we're passing, if we're passing in that kind of way, we tend to start to get very cold at the feet, and that process kind of creeps up the legs and the hands and the fingers, and we get colder and colder and colder, and then we gently slide out. The depiction in Ghost itself of that gentleman on the operating table that slips out the head,
yes,
that is actually very, very correct. That is one way that it certainly happens. Other times we can become earthbound, and that would be if we're very materialistic, or we feel that our life has been cut short and we don't deserve it, and that we can hang around, and so we would eject. What generally happens is relatives would come and find us and advise us of what's happened, and then get taken up. And again, as in Ghost, up into the light, literally into the light. So there are various ways of it happening. One way that I also explain to people, because the process of dying, it doesn't matter what you're dying from and whether it's an accident or anything, the actual process is painless, absolutely painless. So the example that I give is of somebody drowning, and because the soul knows that it's going to pass, because it has all that information, you eject from the body. You can see the body thrashing about, panicking, gasping for air, but you're not physically there. So the body's doing its thing as an animated piece of meat, really, but we're watching that. So again, there's no emotions with it. We're not frantic for what's happening. We're just observing, and then we're taken up. So passing itself is absolutely painless. My guide once said to me many years ago, because I was doing a reading for a woman, and she was quite very stressed about it, and the exact words were, and again he came through in trance, and his exact words were, "My child, why are you afeard of passing? You were never afeard of being born, and what you're doing is you're just going back through a door through which you entered." And I think it's a wonderful thing. None of us were scared of being born, absolutely, and it's the same with passing.
Yes. Yeah, I think we buy into the fact, or the thought, that we're human, and all of our fears come up about, is there really a God? Is there really a heaven? All that. Do we all have guides, Leo?
Yes, absolutely. Now, we have a main guide, and that guide is with us before we incarnate, through, and after. We can have several sets of them. So, for example, there can be a little group of them, and it doesn't, it's not domain to any particular age range or not, but you may have 3 or 4 as well that would serve you, maybe up to 6 or 7, say, and then the whole group may change, or a couple of members may move on and others come back. But the ones that move on, they're always around. They don't lose contact. They just kind of give over that experience to others. So we may have several changes during our lives. Now, those who are very aware and mediums, we also have, for example, with myself, I have guides that work with me when I do phone readings, guides with me, different guides when I do demonstrations, when I do trance work. For me, I'm kind of just open, and whoever wants to step in, we've got that kind of arrangement. So some might be philosophy, some might be teaching about colour healing or whatever it might be. I have different guides that help me with automatic writing. There are a big group of guides around me. I'm aware of around 40 of them, and so they kind of juggle, and I think that's slightly unusual. But we all have sets of guides. This idea of one guide, that's the main guide. But we have others that are there. And sometimes, a family member will step in as a guide to a medium. It's I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not common. But that happens a lot. And for others as well, that are not mediums. So yes, we've all got several guides, and the one main guide, like the overseer or supervisor, the kind of
You know what I just did the other day is first of all, I started a gratitude journal, and every day I write 3 things that I'm grateful for, and then 3 things that I would really like to have happen during the day. And the past week, when I've been writing them out, those 3 things that I really would like to see happen are happening. And so I just had this thought, because I've never had a real relationship from my end with whoever my spirit team is. And I thought to myself, maybe it's because I'm not being specific enough. I have so many thoughts in my head, and if anybody tried to listen, I'm all over the place. And so I just had this aha moment that maybe the way to be more in communication is to write, because the act of writing, especially my gratitude journal of 3 things that I'm grateful for, 3 things that I'd like to have happen, that's me actually putting intention and thinking about what it is. So when I flew back from Heathrow a couple days ago, I bought myself a notebook, and I decided on the airplane to just write a letter to my guides. And it really focused my intention of where I am, what I want, who I am, the struggles that I'm having, and really requesting for help. And I have to tell you, the last 2 days, the things that I've written about, things are changing, things are happening. So, I don't have it all handled by any means, but I thought maybe the way, and maybe not just for myself, but if others are interested in forming this relationship with your spirit team, because we all have it, that we use more clarity in our thoughts and in our speaking, and if it helps, just to get a journal and write it out. And boy, I've had new ideas come to my mind, and really great stuff. I thought, well, maybe that's the key for me, so I throw that out there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I manifest an awful lot, and I've manifested some fantastic things. Some of them you just wouldn't believe, and I kind of think of it and think, wow, that's actually happened. So manifesting is our right. There's no kind of limit, so you can manifest. We can't take away other people's free will, so we can't say that's the guy that I want to marry. If you're a lady, for example, very aware of that now. That's the guy that I want to marry, and that's going to be hit. We can't take that away, but we can ask for the type of partner that we want and wait for them to come. So I really believe in manifestation. It's actually in the Bible as well. In a couple of ways. One of them is ask and you shall receive, and the other is knock and the door shall open. It was intentional to be there, but it was kind of hidden because it wasn't understood. But it's actually talking about manifestation, and manifestation is about creating. So when you're writing these things down, you're creating, you're setting that intention. This is what I want. And I think if we all understand that we can have things that are due to us as long as it doesn't interfere with those tests that we have established. So, for example, if we've said we want this whole life in poverty just to get a taste of it, to see what it's like. Well, if we're living that life, we're not suddenly going to get rich. But if part of the life is taste poverty, then taste wealth, and you start to manifest, then that wealth will find its way to you. But there's no limit to it, whether it's, you want a car or a house, good health, whatever it may be, you can manifest it. And if it doesn't interfere with your life path, then it will happen.
Really great. Leo, what are you most passionate about now? Is there an area of this that you're studying or exploring, or
oh God,
what lights you up?
Teaching.
Yeah, good.
Making people aware. Like a lot of mediums, I know that my intention is to hopefully leave this world in a better place and to bring this wonderful experience and this knowledge to people. And that was one of the reasons that Summerland was written, so that people can understand in a real way, in a tangible way. Summerland, the book is different as well, because when it was first released, it was released in 2014, but when it was first released and I gave out some copies, a quarter of those that bought it came back and said, look, I've never had experiences before, but as I'm reading your book, I'm having dreams about my mum, my dad, somebody I've lost. There's something in it that kickstarts development. And I think that if people can read it and then experience that, so it's not just an experience of reading the book, but it's of, oh my God, this is real, and have that connection with their loved ones. So that's something that really, really excites me. That is something that I was born for. But reading for people and teaching people, because to recap on something that I said before, we should all have this contact. There should be no need for mediums. Mm-hmm. And if we can all have that real contact, this world would be very different. We wouldn't get rid of, it's a place of testing, so there are always going to be wars. But if people realise that, you can't just do what you want in life. Well, you have that freedom, but there are repercussions. There's no hell. We judge ourselves. But if we realise that actually, you can't do something and plea bargain and get away with it, because you have to make recompense for it. And I think it changed the world in a beautiful place, and we will get there. We will get there.
Yeah, I have no doubt. Even my last week spending at Arthur Findlay College, I thought, I have the power to share my experiences with others. And this is not something that's just for Leo or just for Sandra. I mean, we're human beings, and I know we are souls having a human experience, and to be able to share and have people start connecting with the spirit world themselves and using their spirit team. And I mean, it's a whole different kind of life I lead now than I used to. And it's exciting.
It is. And I think for people to have that experience and then to have that choice, I know, I think you mentioned before that you'd had an astral projection experience where you come out of your body. I think once you've been out of your body, absolutely there is something else, and lots of people are having near-death experiences, and more people are talking about it. So the world is changing incredibly quickly.
It's very exciting. Let's just wrap up a little bit here with what if I wanted to get in touch with you? Well, not me, but somebody who. Yeah. What kind of services do you offer? And I know some of our listeners are not in the UK and may not be able to physically go meet you and take a class with you. But what do you offer?
I offer phone readings, Skype readings, and you can get me on www.leo, Leo dash or hyphen Bonomo, BON for Norman, OM for Mother, O.com. So you can get me through there. If you Google me, you'll find me. So,
I found you without even looking. Isn't that great?
Always meant to be. And I'm really blessed to know you, really blessed.
Well, it's so much fun. It really is to have a partner, and there's not one of us alone that can change the world. And not that I'm out to changing the whole world, but by having so many of these conversations with people, it really is all of us joining arm in arms for the greater good, letting people know that we aren't alone and there's this invisible power around us and within us, and there's a whole new way to live life. If I can take away the sting of grief, it's more than a sting, it's a deep pain, or help lessen that through these conversations. It's really important.
It is. I think it's a fundamental that we've forgotten. We never used to have that fear of it. And if you look at Mexico, they have a celebration, a Day of Death, and it's a very joyous thing. I think with the rise of religions in particular directions, it's created this fear, and it is wrong. Spirits say that if we can help one person in this life, then our life has been successful. And I think people like myself and yourself, and others that don't believe but just generally are helpful people, wonderful work is done. So even if we help one, it's well worth living.
Would that be your final thoughts for this episode, or is there anything last that you want to get out before we end this episode?
Whatever you believe, if you just do good, love each other, be helpful when you can, and just create that energy. And it's a beautiful thing. It
really is. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and don't ever underestimate the power of this energy, the power of prayer, the power of intention. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. And the more you delve into it, the more you understand it's real. So it's a brilliant thing.
Yeah, and I'm just getting the image of my mind of lifting weights. It's not something that you're going to have a perfect chiseled body the first time you walk into the gym, but the more you practice, I think this is kind of a muscle that we're strengthening, and the more it becomes normal, the more it becomes something you want to do, and it's great.
Yeah, the more harmony we seek, the more we find, and the more we spread.
Yes.
Because it's infectious. It is infectious. Thank God.
It is. Well, Leo, thank you for being our guest today.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Oh, you're welcome. Always goes so fast. And for our listener too, thank you for being here and spending an hour with us. And many people have written me and they've listened to every single episode. That's over 150 hours of commitment here. So something good's happening, and I know this episode's made a difference in my life, and if it has, I do trust it's made a difference in your life. I want people to know that we have a website, WeDon'tDieRadio.com, going through a little construction, but you can click on any episode that I've played now or that we've shared and find out more about the guests. It's taking you now to the YouTube page where the episodes are, because within the next 2 weeks there's a lot of episodes that are going to be coming your way. So if you do watch the episode on YouTube or listen to it on YouTube and you scroll to the comments, just above the comments, you'll find the link to Leo's books and to Leo's website and more. And I want to remind people that this coming September 2017, I will be live in person at the Afterlife Research and Education Symposium on stage with 26 other folks that are the cutting edge information about in science and medicine and the psychic world, why life after death is real, and helping you connect. So if you're interested, go to afterlifestudies.org to register, and I'd love to meet you in person. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and it is absolutely a delight and a privilege and an honor to get to be your host on We Don't Die Radio. And I do believe with all my heart that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is important. So remember, we are never alone. You have a spirit team around you that loves you unconditionally and is here to work with you and supporting you, having your dreams fulfilled. So I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.